Hey YouTube, what's up? Thanks for tuning in. Hobby Plus CR-18 drift van, 2-speed rear-wheel drive. No, unfortunately, that's not a new truck from Hobby Plus. Unfortunately, that's only a custom build I made. I know most of you guys prefer videos with new products, new trucks, but honestly, I prefer really making my own stuff. I know I do also make a lot of videos about new stuff that's on the market, but it's much more interesting for me to do my own builds, my mods, and not only buy stuff and make plug and play. What's that? That's a Frankenstein out of a Hobby Plus CR-18 chassis. So not a new CR-18P like the Rockvan here. Simple CR-18 chassis. It's from my CR-18 Builders Edition, but it's more or less exactly the same chassis as the stock or normal CR-18s, only with some upgrades, metal shocks and wheel weights. So like this here. And of course a Hobby Plus CR-18P Rockvan body, which I bought as spare body, and electronics and 2-speed are from an FCX24 from FMS. And this is the very first custom truck in my career that turned out to be, in the end, much simpler than I had planned it initially. And it's such a lot of fun to drive and works that awesome so far that I will not change it. So let's take a look inside. Here you can see let me find a screwdriver, the 2-speed transmission of an FCX24. And inner fenders I bought. Those are highly recommended because otherwise you have such a lot of dust inside. And a simple stock, that's against the lights, the red light, I don't like those to shine out. And more or less a stock CR-18 Builders Edition chassis. I changed the servo from frame to axle, which I will show you later. So why is it much simpler now than I had planned it? Of course, initially I had planned to use I have tons of metal alloy beadlock rims and a ton of wheels, and I had planned to use some of those metal beadlock rims and try to find some drift tires, or even find drift tires that would fit here, or to print some tires. But in the first test runs, those are the stock tires of the CR-18s, so without any foams. They have wheel weights in the front from the Builders Edition. This was such a lot of fun to drive that I didn't change them yet and didn't try to print or to check some real drift tires, because it really goes well. Furthermore, initially I intended to use some gyro. I have this Turbo Racing 4-channel receiver with gyro for years now. I never used it. Or I have this, I wanted to use probably this tiny FlySky gyro. Or meanwhile I do even have some gyros for the new Dumbo RC radio. However, it drives that nice and no problem at all controlling it, that I stayed with the receiver unit I initially only for test purposes put inside, and that's the FCX24 receiver unit. That's simply a normal FCX24 radio and receiver. You can or could buy those as spares, cheap, and I bought two because I really liked those radios, or like them still. I know there are some problems with the servos now. However, I used one of those. Furthermore, I used a 2-speed transmission of an FCX24 you could also get really cheap some time ago, and I thought in a drift van I would need a speed motor, which I have here anyway, for the monster truck I want to build for a long time and still didn't finish. But as you can see here, it's more than fast enough with the stock motor. So in second gear it's really fast, more than sufficient. And while driving I mostly only drive half speed, so no need for the speed motor, and I'm super happy with the speed in second gear it has now. So that's second gear, I don't know, is it second or first gear? Yes, it's second gear, first gear, but not on the bench. You did see the videos. And furthermore, I initially intended to make a super complicated servo mount for the shift servo, but this also turned out to be super easy. So far I only mounted the servo to the frame with an M2 screw in the shim, and that sits bomb proof still. I really bashed around with this truck quite a bit so far. With a stock 600 milliamp hours LiPo, I stopped normally at 3.8 volts, and I guess it was 10-12 minutes. Most of you guys drive their trucks till low voltage cut off, so you would probably get 20 to 30 minutes of driving full bashing around with one of those. So actually, absolutely, it's super sturdy. No need to make a better servo mount. And of course I made a custom link for shifting. What is easy, simply bend wire a little bit, and this, it works super nice. So I hope I can show it to you with the open body. No problem at all shifting, and perfect. So much easier than I had thought. What else more complicated did I want to do? Of course, that truck is rear-wheel drive, as you've read in the title, and it's only rear-wheel drive, and front is not driven. That is super easy. I simply didn't use the front drive shaft, and I did close and remove one of the small gear inside and close this from inside so that no dust gets in. And initially this was of course still locked diffs, and I played around and tested around a lot. I had several ideas. I played around with ball bearings in the rims so that they could turn freely and not locked, and I intended to cut simply the shaft inside of the axle and make some ball bearings there and some cover. But finally I simply tested removing the whole shaft out of the axle, and the tires, wheels, rims are held by 2 ball bearings. The whole truck is equipped with ball bearings, so I changed the bushings to ball bearings. I did already do this in my CR-18 Builder's Kit Edition chassis maybe 1 year ago or 2 years ago, and they sit really firmly. So I simply mounted only the end, I don't know the name of those, the end parts of the final parts of the axles to the C-hubs, and here I use a shim and the nut screw, and this holds up absolutely perfectly so far. So that's a big surprise too. It was much easier than I initially thought, and yeah, I tried quite a bit, but in vain, to do something to make those spin free, and then it was that easy, and still no kind of wear, no signs of wear. So no problem, and surprisingly easy. Works. You saw it driving. And what I did have to do is I had to mount the axle to I had to mount the servo to the axle, what you cannot really see here easily. And there are also always some guys who make, let's find some light, black trucks, what you won't see well in a video. I made a simple servo and axle mount, as I had already shown you for the CR-18 PT Hunter and for the small RGT axles. In the Hobby Plus axles, the screws have to be mounted from backside, not from front side, so simple modifications, and then I printed a servo mount. I even used the stock servo here still. So far so good. And what else did I modify? I increased the steering angle. Compare this to a stock Hobby Plus truck. That's a stock chassis. And you check the maximum steering angle, and I hope you can see it on camera. It's significantly increased. What's probably important for a drifter, it was for sure much more fun. Initially, when I didn't increase and mod the steering angle, I had to use dual rate for the servo, so it couldn't use its total range because it did already block. But after making this modification, 100% servo range and significantly increased steering angle. I know it's still not a drifter. That was super easy. Simply sand the C-hubs a little bit on the side where these metal parts of the axle touch, and then you will increase the steering angle significantly. And it worked super easy. This truck is one of my biggest surprises. And why did I have to do the servo and axle mount? I forgot to tell this to you, because with the servo frame mount, it had extreme bump steer. So as soon as you steered, the body was totally angled. That didn't look well at all. It was extreme, and now no bump steer at all anymore. So that's super nice. And with the servo and the frame, it was really, that way, it was extreme. So that's highly recommended. Okay, that's more or less everything I did to the chassis, and not super difficult. Everyone can do it. And of course I used the spare rock van body, but unfortunately that was quite a bit of work. That's the body of the rock van builder's edition, and you see this is pre-cut. Everything comes pre-cut, but I used a spare body for the rock van, which I did already buy before the builder's edition was released, that one. And unfortunately that does not come pre-cut. Cutting the body is not a big problem, but cutting all the openings for the grille and the bumper, that was quite a bit of work, because the marks were not correctly on the correct position, so it was not super easy. Making the body was quite a bit of work, more than I had expected. And of course I did, if it's a drift van, I didn't like to use the stock bumper of the rock van, and I simply made a super simple front bumper, printed it, so that's how it comes out of the printer. A bit of sanding is required. And what I forgot to show you and to tell you is how to mount the two-speed transmission of the FCX24 to the skid plate of the CR-18. I still use the stock skid plate of the CR-18, but the FCX24 transmission does not fit, of course. That's a stock transmission of a CR-18 or CR-24. They do have the same one. You see the 3 openings for the screws here, and the Hobby Plus FCX24 4 openings, and yeah, that does not work. That was quite a bit of work. I played around for several weeks with this, and I made such a mount that's not cleaned. Sanding, cleaning, removing is still required, and the FCX24 transmission simply sits that way. After cleaning, the screws are mounted from here up to hold the transmission. That's bomb-proof, and the whole transmission that way simply sits between the stock skid plate or up on the stock skid plate of the CR-18 and is held by 2 long screws. The 2 screws that hold the stock skid plate, I used longer ones, which now also hold the skid plate or the second skid plate, which makes it possible to mount the FCX24 transmission, and that's also bomb-proof. Not a lot to see here, but I don't want to disassemble it anymore. And mounting the body of the Rockvan is super easy. If you buy those parts, you won't get the whole stuff to mount it in front of the CR-18. That's the stock bumper, the bracket here, but it's super easy. I simply used body posts I had from other Hobby Plus trucks. You can buy all this stuff for super cheap, CR-24, CR-18, and in the end of those I put, you can see it here, I hope, I simply screwed 2 M2 screws, 1 on each post, and those M2 screws go in the opening of the joint that comes with the parts of the spare body of the Rockvan. You have to buy those also separately, so grill and bumper and whatnot. And this works super nice. So simply that screwed into the body post and sits here, and as you can see, it works super nice. And that way it's also super easy to adjust the position of the body. So for wheelbase, or for the wheels sitting in center of the arches, the wheelbase is okay of the CR-18, but to move the body front and reverse. And on the back side I simply made magnetic body mounts. Here there's a groove inside, I hope you can see it. So if the counterpart from the upper side sits, there is no possibility at all to move, because those mounts or those magnets from the upper side sit here inside. That was also not super difficult, and here you see I also simply used body posts, and that way I could adjust the position. I had to make a set. My first one was more sturdy and larger on the left and right side, but after I had mounted the inner fenders, there was a collision, so I had to make those a little bit smaller. And on the upper side, a simple bracket mounted to the bracket that holds the rear bumper. A little bit of testing, and simply glued the magnets to the upper position. What's super easy, of course, you glue the magnets to the upper position that way. First you make this part, and then you put those magnets to those magnets, then glue on the magnets on the upper side, and then close the body correct position, maybe clamp a little bit and let it dry overnight. Works perfectly. Also a little bit simpler now, a little bit shorter. After after mounting the inner fenders, I had to cut this. It was also a little bit larger initially. So it works perfect. I know many of you probably won't tell this a drift car because it's not a real drift car. Maybe it really needs drift tires, but so far I won't change it. It's such a lot of fun to drive, and it drives awesome. That was a super big surprise. It was so easy. Most work maybe body and the lights, because of course I made custom lights and didn't use the light set. This was quite a bit of work, and then tinkering and testing around with how to mount the 2-speed transmission, how to make this. It's not perfect, it's still not perfect, needs a little bit of sanding, and then this stuff sits bomb proof, servo bomb proof and transmission bomb proof. We will see how this will keep up. I really bashed it around for several batteries, quite a lot, and so far no signs of wear. So Hobby Plus, maybe drift van. Some people would like it, maybe with better tires, rear wheel drive, 2-speed, but first speed, yeah, is not really necessary. That's second speed, way too fast here. But if you want to drive slowly, you can also go on first speed. If you drive on your table or whatever, of course that's not a crawler anymore, because of only rear wheel drive. So guys, thanks for watching. Maybe that's something for you if you want to tinker. It's a lot of fun to drive, and it works awesome, and it's not as complicated as you would initially think. Hobby Plus CR-18 drift van. Hobby Plus, maybe people would like something like this. Thanks for watching guys. Hope to see you in the next video. I'll be back.